Glad that you joined us here today as we went from spring to winter all in one day on a Monday. It was that's Florida weather. If just in case there's somebody who doesn't know, my name is Robbie. This is Christy, and we're leading tonight. And oftentimes on a Monday, it would be exactly the same thing we do on Sunday. So it's a sermon and music and worship, all of that. But for today, based on our schedule and all these things, we merged together our Wednesday night with Monday night together. Hence the abbreviated worship service, and then now we want to move into this teaching conversation. And so the way that's going to work is Christy's going to open things up, and along the way, throughout our time together, you have the ability to ask the questions. But the questions is best if you give them to me electronically. Can you pull that slide?
Sorry,
and so
I forgot I'm in charge.
I'm going to have a couple opportunities where this slide will be up, but that QR code works for the whole entire night. So if you got more than one question, you go back to that same screen and it should work fine. Shouldn't be a problem. And so as you have questions about the whole entire series, we're talking about restoring your soul as God had intended that you would experience restoration. We talked physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Hit really hard on forgiveness last week, and then boundaries yesterday. So I'm assuming that you are going to have some questions along the way. You can give some of those now. And then what will happen as you write those questions in, I'm going to moderate those and feed them to her when the time comes. And primarily, you're going to be doing the teaching. I'm just the helper today. So I think that makes sense. We got it?
Yes,
All right, so take it away.
Yeah, so again, this tonight's a little odd because it feels a little different than our Wednesday night for those of you who have been here on Wednesday nights. So we're going to jump in really quick, but I have to do a little bit of recap. So if you were here yesterday, so you kind of understand where we've been, what we're doing. So how this came out, this session here was really when I'm talking to people and I'm talking about healing, it never fails when we talk about healing. It always comes back, but what about this relationship that I'm in? So we can't avoid being in a relationship with people, right? And we want to make sure that we're being in a relationship in healthy ways. And really kind of what I've found is that because of all of our traumas, because of our past experiences, because of so many different things, there's a lot of times we don't understand what is healthy relationship and what is unhealthy relationship. That we don't understand how to have healthy relationships, maybe because of, like I said, growing up, because of our own traumatic past and things like that. So I kind of titled this section called Living Restored. So we're on this healing journey to heal our souls, and we get to this point of we're finding some healing, and then we have to go out and we have to live in healing. And we have to live with people. And that piece right there is really important. We can't really skim over this idea of relationships because it is so important, not just for the healing process, but for the communities. So many layers to this. And when I'm working with people, there's like this dichotomy that we feel that, I'm supposed to work on myself, but yet I have to be in relationship, and that person's supposed to work on them, and where's the line? Where's the healthy boundaries? Where do we start? So we have to kind of hold these two things that kind of seem in kind of opposed to each other. We kind of have to hold these two things in tandem with each other. I have to work on myself. I'm the only one that's responsible for my healing. And at the same time, I have to be in relationship with other people who can either impact the healing or encourage the healing.
A typical unhealthy relationship is, I don't want to work on me, so I'm going to work on you. That's a typical, we normalize that. That seems normal, but that's not that. We're trying to move from that.
And I think Jesus talked about that with the log and the speck. Let me work on the speck in your eye because I don't want to work on the log in my eye, right? So it's human nature to do that. So in the process of, for me, in finding why are relationships important, I came across this TED Talk. You can actually, the piece of paper that you have on the bottom is the last thing there. You can Google that. And the gentleman's name is Robert Waldinger, and it's called The Good Life. What makes a good life? And it's a really short little TED Talk. Lots of great information in there, but basically what he says is that social connections are good and loneliness kills. The experience of loneliness is toxic. It is not just about the number of friends, but the quality is what matters. So if we have a bunch of friends, but they're very toxic or shallow, it's not as impactful if we have a few friends that are securely attached. And that good relationships protect our brain. And actually, he goes into that quite a bit, that it's not just our brain that it protects, but it's our body. It's people with good, healthy connections have the Alzheimer's and dementia is a lot later in life. So there's all of these great things. When we talk about healthy relationships, when we talk about healing, we can't skip over the fact we have to have healthy relationships in our lives in order to live out this restored healing. You have questions, okay? Go ahead.
Can we have some fun ones first?
Or
do we have to go deep into the serious stuff first?
Okay.
All right, so somebody wrote this, and I didn't write any questions in, I swear.
Okay.
And one of the best parts about this whole process is people ask, we've done this is our 5th week.
Yes.
People ask better questions when you know it's anonymous.
Yes.
When you don't have to raise your hand. So I have no idea who wrote this, and it wasn't me.
Wait. Do I have the ability to say I'm not answering that question?
Yes,
Okay.
you can say skip.
Okay, skip. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Is it okay to manipulate my wife with chocolate?
So, this is actually, that's a great question.
Because?
Because I would ask, if that person was sitting in front of me, I would say, let's reconceptualize this. Is it manipulation? Are you actually treating her well?
Great. All right.
Yes.
Okay,
Is it okay to treat your wife well? That's the question I would ask.
There we go. Okay. So I don't want to jump in too far, but even boundaries. But so I'll just give you one to just kind of dive into a little bit. How do you co-parent with someone who's abusive and triggers trauma and uses your children as a pawn? So our questions typically are, what about? And so that's the beginning of a bunch of these to be what about type questions. So co-parent with somebody who's abusive and triggers trauma.
Okay, so I would probably have to ask more questions into this person. And so if the person is abusive, we need to make sure that we're notifying the proper authorities. If that child is being abused, we need to make sure that we are taking appropriate action in that protective element in legal ways.
But if it's spiritual emotional abuse, then DCF doesn't care.
If it's manipulation, if it's power and control, then I think that's where you start coming alongside your child, and you start teaching them how to restore, how to heal. I always say the best way for your child, the best thing for your child is for them to see you on a restoration and a healing path. You have to heal first, because you cannot lead your child to a level of healing you have not gone yourself. So you have to find healing for yourself so that you can teach your child how to heal, so that you become a trusted person for that child, that they can come to you and you become their safe person. Because, this really stinks that we can't protect our kids, even if it's from another parent. And we have to be really careful in that parenting situation. But if you become the safe adult, then you can teach your child these.
Well, part of this goes back to the attachment theory issue. Isn't it true that you
Yes.
said that it takes one healthy parent to help a kid have healthy attachment?
It's actually not even a parent. It takes
one
one
adult.
healthy
That's right.
adult to change the trajectory of a child's life. just one adult. And if
So that grandparent, teacher.
right, if you have one healthy attachment, one healthy relationship, that changes the trajectory of a child's life. That's always amazing to me, that sometimes we think, I'm not good enough, I can't undo the pain. And we can undo the pain, but we can speak into our kids' lives and teach them how to heal.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
I
In the
wish we
same
could
way,
insulate our kiddos, but we can't.
it's almost the same answer, but just a little twist, a hair bit of a twist. How do you co-parent with somebody who's controlling and doesn't respect your boundaries and sets unrealistic expectations for you to honor theirs? So it sounds like the boundaries are one-sided for somebody who's got a. You told me off camera here earlier that you were wrestling with the idea of power and control. That whole thing. You can't do a lot of that today.
Right.
But power control games is an awareness tool, and we have to understand when something is abusive and then when to take action.
Yes.
Versus how to live in broken humanity. It's a little.
Yes.
That's in that slide there.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that question just a minute, but let me talk about the power and control games. Power and control games is something we teach through the Making Sense of Your Worth class, and it's a whole 2 hours. We talk about power and control games, that how they hurt, and how so often we don't even realize that either one, we are participating in them, that we are actually doing the power and control games, or two, that we are being affected by the power and control games by other people. So that's a 2-hour conversation. That's also a little
You're going to be doing that the week
commercial,
after Easter,
as
right?
I say, a little commercial
Okay.
for Making Sense of Your Worth, yes.
And that's coming up 1st of April,
Yeah.
right after Easter.
Right after Easter, yes.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that too.
So
at the end.
more on boundaries. I think.
What was the question again?
How do you co-parent with somebody who's controlling and doesn't respect your boundaries and sets unrealistic expectations for theirs?
So again, it's you have to, depending on the level, if this is a hard thing too. If that person was in front of me, I would say, depending on the level, maybe you need to get a mediator to how toxic is that situation, that you need to get a mediator to come in to kind of mediate the situation. But two, I would also say, is that person what was the term that was used?
Give me a second.
Oh, never mind. You have to kind of go into your own heart and kind of question, is this really, am I really just hurt by what's going on? Or is there really some power and control games? So you kind of have to really pull out your emotions in this, especially when it relates to kids. We have to pull out our emotions and look at it from a different perspective. But then talk to a trusted advisor, talk to a counselor as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Before you go on, let's do one more relationship one. It's a different twist, but it's healthy. So what does a healthy relationship with yourself look like?
What is a healthy relationship with
So
yourself?
before you got further into the others, I thought maybe we'll just tackle that one.
Okay, and I feel like all of my questions are going to come back to this. So we have Making Sense of Your Worth coming up at the first week of April. And really what that is understanding. There's two things you need to understand with this. One is, how do I get my needs met in healthy ways? We all have needs, and again, going through the restoration process, the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, is even understanding the needs in those arenas. We all have relational needs that need to be met. So understand, how do we get our needs met in healthy ways? I always caveat that, healthy ways. And two, to replace the lies with truth. So those two things, you work on those two things, and
Miles ahead.
I guarantee you'll see a difference.
Okay, again, it fits, so let me give you another one.
Okay.
How do you balance spending time on future and career, building a relationship in a young relationship? So I don't know what young relationship means, but I may be engaged, or let's just say newly married. What's the balance between career and healthy relationship at home?
I think
We wrestle with that every day.
here's the thing: is if you are working on yourself, it's going to impact every relationship you're a part of. whether that is in the career world or in the personal world, is that when you are, again, doing those two things, is figuring out how to get your needs met in healthy ways to replacing lies with truth. When you are working on those two things, you will see the difference in your career. You will see the difference in your relationships. Yeah.
I would say go ahead.
Okay. All right, we're going to keep going. So y'all have more questions, you can ask them. So we talked this past weekend about boundaries and really understanding what are they not. And this is the list we talked about this past weekend. So some of this is familiar, but it's always good to look over it again. So what are they not? They're not about punishment or consequences. When we put boundaries in place, we don't do it out of anger. We don't do it out of punitive. It's not about consequences. It's not always about a permanent end to the relationship. So sometimes boundaries, we may need to create some distance in order to find some healing for ourselves, but it's not permanent. Sometimes it is. It's not about controlling someone else's behavior. A lot of people really struggle with this idea that when I'm putting in a boundary, I need you to quit what you're doing. That's not a boundary. That is trying to control someone else's behavior. A boundary is about what I'm allowing in my life. It's not anti-love. It must be communicated. We can't just assume people understand our boundaries.
You've said this 100 times. I just had this new picture. So if I've got my house and I build a really big wall around my house to shut everybody out, that's a kind of boundary. But what you're saying is you're inviting people in your relationship to know where the door is.
Absolutely.
To your front yard.
Right.
So you're welcome when you come through the front door, and the front door is, here's how I define you are welcome. But if you're jumping over my wall or knocking my wall down, you're not welcome.
Yes.
So it's providing protection, but it's also a front door.
Even in that illustration, who are the people that are jumping over fences?
Robbers.
Yeah, it's the people that are trying to get in and they're not supposed to be in. So if people are coming to the front door and knocking on the door, that's the people that are respecting the boundaries that you have set up. Must be communicated. Hold on.
No, keep going.
Defines what you will allow in your life. It creates space for healing and defines how you will interact in healthy ways. I keep really kind of hounding on this idea of communication. We cannot expect people to read our minds. I know that sounds really kind of elementary, but for whatever reason, we kind of tend to do this in relationships, especially in close relationships. So like, didn't you see that bothered me? Well, no, I didn't. So we have to communicate, hey, this is not something I want in my life. So this is a boundary for me that I'm not going to participate in.
You could easily go
Okay.
tangible perspective with that.
Yeah. So this is what we talked about this past weekend too. There's a difference between living with someone's humanity and living in someone's dysfunction. That we have to live with grace and forgiveness and mercy, but we do not have to live in dysfunction. So I want to invite questions for that too.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Well, some of what I have goes back to the forgiveness thing.
Okay.
So I think maybe stick with the relationship and boundaries. Tangible and perspective would be good to give some tools. And then as we go through some of these things, people may have some more questions on any of the topics.
Yep. So the next sheet over is understanding healthy versus toxic relationships. So we don't know what we don't know. And for a lot of us, we've lived in maybe some toxic relationships all of our life, and we think of it as normal. That we are like, oh, this is just the way we handle things. This is just what we do. This is how we function. And to really understand that maybe, you kind of want to, is there a possibility that maybe you could learn something here? That maybe we can learn a different way. So we talked about power and control games, and there's this whole list of, it's like 14 power and control games that we talk about where it's a scale. And so one of the things on that was silent treatment. And for me, when I was going through the class, I was being trained in it, and silent treatment, explained silent treatment, and I was like, oh, you mean that's not how you handle things? I thought that's what you did when you were mad at people. You just ignored them until you got over it, or they ignored you until you got over it. That's just how you function. And to really understand for me that actually, no, that healthy adults don't ignore people they love. They communicate, hey, I'm really upset. I need to work on some things. Let me process this for a few days, and then I'll get back to you. Can we talk tomorrow at 7 p.m.? Now, God, that's really was a novel idea for me, that we, as adults, we're supposed to communicate, hey, this is a boundary. I'm upset. Let me figure out how to work on this. So with the power and control games, it really starts to open your eyes that, hey, maybe there's some things that I'm doing that are actually impacting my relationship. So there's a great article, Andrew J. Bauman. I didn't know how to do this on the sheet, so there's the link. It's called The Spectrum of an Abuser. And just a little caveat to that, this is a gentleman, he's a Christian counselor that works with a lot of Christian men, so his perspective is really from a husband-wife perspective, and it's from the man as the abuser. I just wanted to kind of get that out there. That's not always the case. There's no abusers it's not gender specific. All of us can participate in that kind of behavior. So just to let you know, there's a little caveat there. So, is there any questions?
Yeah. Well, it just
Okay.
more of the same kind of thing in terms of boundaries, but oftentimes it's, well, what about my unique situation? So for instance, what about boundaries? What boundaries would be appropriate in a marriage with an alcoholic? So marriage boundaries, but then we have this one issue. So the principles are still the same, but with alcohol, it is just the point of interest. All right, go ahead.
Again, if that person was in front of me, I would say find an Al-Anon immediately. Talk to people who have been in your situation before. Again, that kind of goes to that community piece as well, that when we're in a relationship with people, it helps our brains, it helps us
And
think.
boundaries are different depending on how dangerous the situation is. The
Yes.
more danger there is, the taller the walls.
Yes.
Or the greater the distance.
Yes.
The less danger, so if this is a new situation, it's not verbally or physically abusive, there might be more grace and mercy.
Yes.
But the more toxic it is, the more distance there must be for your safety.
Yes, and just to expound on that a little bit more, there are a lot of people that are in those types of relationships that don't realize actually how toxic they are. And so that's why I encourage Al-Anon, because once you start talking with people who have been in that situation, and they go, wait a minute, that's not a yellow flag, that's a red flag. Because you can't see how's it go? You can't see the forest for the trees. When you're in the forest, sometimes that you can't, did I say that right? You can't see the forest for the, okay, feels wrong to me. You know what I mean. When you're in the middle of something, sometimes you can't see the specifics. So talking to some people who have been there is really important. But then I go to this. This is, even in this situation too, I go talk about the drama triangle. This, again, it's another whole hour that we could talk about this. There's a QR code on,
It's on the screen.
it's on the screen. I think it's on your sheet as well. It goes to a YouTube video that explains it. And so basically what this is if there's some kind of drama in your life, you can step back and you can say, what role am I playing in this? And so there's 3 roles. There's the rescuer, there's the persecutor, and there's the victim. And if you kind of step back, you can start looking, yep, that's me. Yep, that's that person. Yep, that's that person. But what's really interesting about the drama triangle is we don't stay in that role. we tend to move around that role. And the illustration that I like to use for me, I'm telling on myself, in this is I like to walk in the morning and walking across A1A, and there's the crosswalks there, and sometimes I yell at people because they don't stop.
Well, because you feel like you're going to get hit by a car, and so you're a victim of traffic.
Yes, and so there was a truck coming, and he had I thought he was slowing down to stop, but he actually had his turn signal on, so I started to walk out, and he didn't turn down, and he kind of went and was right there and turned. He was actually going to where I was going. And so immediately I'm like, how dare he try to run me over? So I immediately took on the role of the victim. I immediately did. And then I said, no, So I walked over there and I said, excuse me, sir, do you know about the crosswalks? You're supposed to stop if someone's there. I took on the role of, I'm rescuing Olive Woman Beach, right? And then he turned around and looked at me, he goes, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that. And immediately I'm like, oh, I'm now his persecutor. And so within a 7-minute time frame, I rounded all of those things and I became all of them. And so really that's just kind of a small example, but if you really look at if there's a really troubling relationship that you're a part of, if there's something that's been going on for a long time, step back and look. What role are you playing with that? And I really like this video because it tells you how to, if you're the persecutor, if you're the victim, you become a survivor, and it lists out all the things to do to get out of that role.
There's one question that kind of fits into that a little bit. How do you, and it goes back to forgiveness though, how do you forgive somebody who has falsely, maliciously accused you of a crime? So in this case, somebody's accusing them of being a persecutor, but they really feel like an innocent victim. But then the real topic is not how to manage a relationship, it's how to forgive.
Yeah, so again, if accusing you of a crime, you need to find a lawyer.
Practical thing.
There's practical things you should do. Okay, beyond that is you cannot control what other people are saying about you. This is such a hard thing to really understand. That goes back to controlling other people's behavior. And so at the end of the night, the only thing you can control is your actions and your integrity. And can you say, I operated in integrity with that? And so that's a high road kind of mentality that sometimes actually you coming in to defend yourself and you coming in, you're actually creating more of the drama triangle. So it's okay to step out of those relationships.
All right.
All right.
This is, I think, helpful in a lot of ways. Are there tools you can suggest for the guilt you may have when transitioning into healthy boundaries? There's a two-part question. Take
Okay.
that one first, and I'll save the rest for later.
Can you say that again?
Are there tools you can suggest for somebody who's dealing with guilt when they transition to, now I'm going to start providing boundaries for other people, and now I feel guilty about it? So what about the guilt of
okay.
setting up those boundaries and asking for a healthy relationship? The other person doesn't take it well. I feel bad. What do I do?
Oh, yeah. So that again is, I always say that's an indication there's a lie that you're believing about yourself. That when you feel guilty for actually building that boundary, there's a lie somewhere that you're believing.
Do you deserve to be treated in healthy ways?
Right. That would be my question. Is it okay for you to be treated in this way? Okay? Do you want something different? It's okay if you want a different relational interaction. It's okay. The other question that I always ask, especially if they have children, is what would you say to your child if they were in this relationship?
That's a very helpful question I've heard recently. It's such a big deal. if you were given, sometimes it's like if you're giving your advice to your 5-year-old self, what would you say? But in this case,
Yes.
if your son or daughter was in your situation, what would you say to them?
Yes.
Really big deal.
Yes. And really what that does is again, takes you kind of out of that big emotion to say, what's the right way to treat people? Because we use the illustration of the frog in the boiling pot. You know, you put a frog in cold water and you turn on the heat, that he doesn't jump out because he just starts being acclimated to the temperature until he dies. It's the same way when we're in unhealthy relationships, is that we just become acclimated to what's happening. And we don't understand, we don't know that it's actually hurting us, if not killing us.
All right. We might open a 10-minute can of worms here. You ready?
Okay, let me sit down.
Same question. Tools you can suggest for the guilt you feel. Say, so I'm feeling bad about all of this, but here's the thing. But what if it's, well, the question says, does it mean leaving someone behind? So let me frame that question in terms of marriage. I put that back up because I want to make sure everybody's seen it again.
Yes.
But in terms of marriage,
yes,
creating boundaries, does that mean leaving? And then the implications of that? So the person didn't ask about marriage.
Yes.
I'm asking just because I know people thinking it and we need to talk about it.
Yes. So that, I can't, I know. Well, the marriage piece is,
And I can answer if you want.
okay, let me explain outside of marriage or even within marriage. Okay, so if you have two people that are walking down the road together, that means they have to agree and they have to walk down the road in the same direction. So that relationship is whatever, friends, coworkers, whatever. We have similar interests, we have similar goals, we are pointing in the same direction. If one person says, you know what, this road's really, it's not a healthy road for me to be down, I need to find a different road, come with me. If that person says, no, I like this road that I'm on, I'm going to continue down. This person has a choice. Do I find healing and I go down a different road? Or do I keep going down this road of destruction? And so it's a kind of a really simple idea, but sometimes it's really not about leaving them, because we're not saying, hey, you can't come with me. We're saying, hey, let's go this way together. Let's come down this road together. And you have a choice in this matter. If that person decides to stay where they are, I'm just going to stay. You have to decide, are you staying? Or are you going to find health and healing? And if this person says, hey, I need to find health and healing too, we're not kicking them off the path. Nope. Let's go. So that's like a really simple illustration, but I think sometimes it helps.
I think it's super helpful because as a pastor, I would talk about covenant of marriage.
Yes.
Covenant is agreement that our marriage is to having to hold this day forward for better, for worse, richer and poorer, until death do us part. And so we make these promises for life, and then at some point along the way, maybe we got off track, and all of a sudden, one of us or both of us are living in ways we shouldn't be living, and it's like, wait a second, this is harmful, abusive, or unhealthy. So now what do I do? When one of them comes to that realization, it's an invitation to covenant health. So it's changing direction back to what was originally promised. In that covenant, saying, I'm going to be true to you no matter what, but it's going to be in healthy ways, and I want you to go with me. I'm inviting you to go with me with these defined boundaries such that that honors our covenant, and I want to go into this direction. Please go with me. And so sometimes it's not about you leaving someone else. It's about them deciding not to come with you.
Yes. 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 So
I just got 4 more questions. I knew that'd happen.
I know. So it's one of the modalities that I was trained in. She used this illustration. She said, if you have a relationship scale of health, 0 to Jesus. Okay, this is an imaginary scale. It doesn't work. It's not real. But okay, relational health, 0 to Jesus. And you have 2 people that maybe say they come in to her office and they say they're both a 20 on the relationship health. And One of them says, you know what, I can't live like this anymore. I have to find healing. And they do the hard work and they get to 50. Okay? 50 and a 20. She said, what happens is this 20 now has a decision. And what usually happens is one of two things. One, they say, okay, I'm going to do the work to get to the 50. Or they go find another 20. They just say, yep, I'm out. I'm going to find another 20.
I think half the room just groaned when you said that. I think they identify with what you
Yes.
said.
Yeah, because we've seen it happen, and maybe some of us have even experienced that as well, is that there's really only two choices in that. Okay, some questions.
So I want to get a couple in just to make sure I'm honoring the questions that are being asked. Some of these you can answer fairly simply, I think. How do you handle a situation where one parent has chosen to have no contact with their adult child, but the other parent has a good relationship with them? Part of that's a marriage question. Part of that's a drama triangle question, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. So one parent of the adult kid has got a good relationship. The other one has no contact. Mm-hmm. If assuming those spouses are living together,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did they manage that?
That's hard. I think that's
conversation.
It's conversation. There's no simple answer to that. Again, go to see a counselor about that, because then, I have lots of different questions about that. Is there someone that's trying to cause division? Is there someone that needs to maybe ask forgiveness? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of layers to that one.
Some of these things, like, we can't get to all of the
Yes.
answer. I want to make sure we get the tangible
Yep.
perspective, but
Yep, we've got-
the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Jesus gave that. Is that a good practice for us to live by to get healthy?
Yes.
Relatively,
Yes.
but it's broad. Do unto others is broad.
Well,
Boundaries starts to define what that means for you, right?
Do unto others is what you would have them do unto you. There are some people that maybe their relational scale is a 10, and they think it's okay to treat other people like that. That imaginary relational scale. And so, yeah, we want to do to others as we would have them do unto. Again, there's a lot of layers to that, so I would ask questions.
One question I'm going to answer real quick. What are the biblical grounds for divorce, and how's that allowed? And should it get to that point? Should it get to that decision point as a boundary? Biblical grounds for divorce is a longer conversation. I did a whole sermon on it. So whoever asked that, if you want more details, I've got a whole sermon. I could point you in the direction and give you better answers than I can give you right now. But we have some things laid out in that.
Yes. And it's so much more complicated than.
It's not simple.
It's not a simple question. That's not a simple question.
Go ahead.
So let me get to this. So this is a tool that I created that I think maybe can answer some of these questions too. We call it perspective, tangible perspective. And there's a few caveats to this little tool that I use. One is it only works if the two people are actually working on themselves. Okay, so it only works if they're saying, you know what, I'm doing some heart work, I'm doing some work on me, and the other person, if there's another person that's like, no, I'm good, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong with me, then this tool does not work. Okay, so we call it perspective, tangible perspective. And how this works is if I have, hypothetically, if I have a problem with him.
It's a hypothetical.
It's hypothetical.
It hasn't happened once today.
Did it? No. So hypothetically, if I have a problem with him and I say, hey, I need to share my perspective about something. For one thing, when I say that, because we've used this tool a lot, we use it with staff, we use it in lots of different relationships. Now we understand that that's kind of like a code word of saying, oh, there's something going on.
We're going to work on a tool.
Yep. So, but here's the thing is I'm coming and I'm saying, I need to share my perspective about something. My perspective. I'm not coming in and saying, you did this and you did that.
Better not.
And you. I'm not saying that. I'm coming and saying, hey, can I share my perspective on something? And so then we go to the tangibles. The tangibles are something that we can put our hands on. They are not things like, I just didn't like it when you didn't walk by me, or you walked by me and didn't say anything, or
It's the action.
There's action
What happened?
points.
What was said?
It's something that's tangible. So it could be, hey, well, actually, I'm going to use the example I use when there's a staff person that I had to use this with, and I walked into his office, say, hey, can I share my perspective about something? And he said, absolutely, because we've been doing this. And so I said, there's a couple things that happened that have been bothering me, and I just want to get some clarification. One, you didn't include me on an email about something. Two, you said something in staff meeting that I've just been wondering about. And I have to tell you my perspective. I don't feel like you value me as a team member. I don't feel like you value me, I don't feel like you respect leadership, my leadership in this place.
But the tangible was you didn't email me, you did say, and so you outlined the words said or the actions taken.
Yes.
Then talked about how you felt about it.
Yes, and so the tangibles were something very concrete. And listen, this is not a time for a laundry list, okay? We don't put 10 things on the tangibles. It's just a couple of things. But then I have to own what I felt about it. I felt disrespected. I felt like you didn't value me as a team member. Then I have to stop and say, can I hear your perspective?
And then
you shut up. Am I allowed to say that?
that's hard for all
Yes.
of us to do.
And then you stop talking and you say, can I hear your perspective?
Well, because if you don't, you're not respecting the other person, and it just creates.
Because who of us has a monopoly on all perspective? Who is it? I mean, none of us do. And when we're asking, hey, I want to hear your perspective. One, does that person feel seen and heard? Yeah. We're saying, hey, I want to hear what you have to say. And I'm also owning the fact I might be wrong about my perspective. And I want to get some clearer perspective on the whole situation. And so in this example, he said, oh my gosh, there was a deadline, and Robbie had asked for that email, and so there was
An explanation.
There was this explanation that I had no idea what was happening in his world. So then I went, oh, well, that makes sense. And here I had been for 3 weeks stewing over, oh my gosh, I cannot believe, oh my gosh, instead of just going, and it was a 10-minute conversation. It was absolutely 10-minute conversation. So if we can't just leave it there, though. So we do perspective, we do tangible, we do perspective, and then we do clearly define expectations, boundaries, and goals. So then we have to say, okay, one, what is something that do we need to set up an expectation? Do we need to set up a boundary, or maybe a goal? Hey, so for him, if I said, hey, I feel like we haven't been on date nights in a while, and I feel like we've been left out. I've been left out. And he goes, oh my gosh, it's been a really busy week.
I thought we didn't have any money.
Right. Oh no. And so then we would set a goal. Okay.
And that's where I can begin manipulating with chocolate.
No, we talked about this already.
Okay, sorry.
3, we're conceptualizing.
Yes.
So then we can talk about goals. Okay, how about if we set a goal, Friday night, we'll go to Garlic.
There we go.
Okay.
I'm in. Friday night.
So you can see how this kind of works. So then you problem solve as a team, hey, how can we resolve this conflict in a way that we both can agree on? We don't problem solve in that top part. At that top part, we're hearing each other.
Which
we're
creates
listening to each
safety for the relationship.
Yeah. On the bottom part is where we problem solve. Okay. Is there any questions or?
I'll have a few, but I think there's nothing related to that tool. But for me, that tool is just revolutionary. It's a big deal. It helps us a ton. It helps our team quite a ton, creating safety in those relationships. And it also helps define, are we two people going in the same direction? Or are we going in different directions? And if we're going in different directions, how do we course correct?
Yeah.
So we can stay healthy in our relationships. It's revolutionary, and this is something you invented as far as I know.
Yes.
So it's been
Yes.
it's been super helpful across the board.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I've used this with a lot of people. I actually used it with some clients today. They're church planners. I use it with them, and this tool, the only time I've ever seen it fail is there was two people that refused to look at their own stuff. That's the only time I've ever seen it fail. So that's why I say it's really important. You have to own what you bring to the table with this. You have to own your stuff. That means that you have to do the work beforehand. You have to come into this conversation really thinking about, oh my gosh, maybe I overreacted just a little bit. Maybe it's really, I'm just hungry. Maybe, what's really going on here? So.
Yeah. So we're going to run out of time. I'm not going to get to all of them, but I thought this was helpful. It's almost completely a different topic. But
Okay.
How do you find faith in God again after a sorrowful amount of loss and purpose in life? It's totally unrelated to relationship stuff, but probably in relationship with God.
Yeah.
So this is a God relationship, and some of these principles still apply. How do I find faith in God again after hurt, loss, and loss of purpose?
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about that one.
Yeah. So again, there's a lot of layers to that. I would say one, pray, journal, even if you think God's not hearing you, keep doing it. The scriptures ask, seek, knock. Keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking. That He does hear your prayers. He really does. The other thing I would say is find one or two people to pray for you, to walk along beside you in this, to really talk to them about what's going on. So that's yeah.
Do you have any more tools or stuff you
Yes.
want to say before we close?
Yes. The other tool, this is one that I've created to, I call it the Arenas tool. And this may be opening up another can of worms. So this is something that I use when I feel like there's a lot going on and life is overwhelming, that I need to really process and organize some things. And so how this works is you list the areas of your life that you operate in: self, family, work, church, financial, extended family, social groups, etc. You kind of just, all of the arenas that you operate in. And then what you do is, in the boxes below, you bullet point, like all of I call them the burning fires. Those things that you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, you can't go to sleep because you're thinking about it. It's all of these things that you just think about. So you just kind of throw everything on that sheet of paper.
That exercise alone, if you stop there, is helpful.
Yes.
Just organizing your thought life.
Yes. So then the next step is, and actually I just realized that there's not a.
Next slide.
Yeah. So then you circle the top 3 stressors from the above list. You just circle them. And then the next sheet, there is, that it's not up here, is you list them out, and then you say, what's my action plan to resolve this? Spiritual, emotional, mental, physical. So it's really a simple thing. One time when I was working on this for me personally, just a season of lots of busyness. I was homeschooling my boys, had 6 kids in church, and there was just a lot going on. And I did my arenas, and it's the house is like taking care of my house. And one of the things that I put in my bucket list of house was dinner, making dinner. And I circled that. That was my big stressor, because every night they want food. And I'm really tired of making dinner for them. And so I just was looking, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got 3 teenage boys at home. I'm homeschooling them. All right, now we know what's on their curriculum for this week. So I made them, each night they had to pick a night that they would cook dinner.
Each had one night
They
a week.
each had one night a week that they would have to cook dinner. And, that's it. And it was off my list. It was done. And now they know how to cook dinner as adults. So my girls, on the other hand, we're working on that. But anyhow, like I said, that's just like a really small thing. There are some things, the things we circle, that are going to be really big. And there may be only God can intervene. And that's okay. Then your action plan is, we pray. We just start praying, God, this is yours. You got to take this one. This is yours. You got to take this one. And we create that action plan. How am I going to pray for this? What am I going to do to make sure that that it's off of my bucket? So again, that's a little tool that I have. What else you got?
I think enough. We probably need to
Okay.
get closer.
Yep. All right. So
Let me say this, that I've got like 4 more questions. If we didn't answer your questions, sometimes it's off topic or something that we maybe could talk about after.
Yes.
So if I didn't answer your question or we didn't, please come by. Let's talk before we leave today, because we just can't get to them all, and some of them are easier said than done.
Yep.
But we don't want to just blanket ignore them. So we'll be stick around afterwards.
Yes. So before we leave, we talked about making sense of your worth a lot tonight. It is a great next step for you. If you want more, if you want to kind of dig a little bit more into this, I strongly recommend that you do this. So here's the QR code. You can register now for it in April. If you would like to, you could do that. If you have any questions, I am available. You can email office@salty.org. If you have any questions, she'll direct them right to me. That's office@salty.org. You can also go to my website, christyobrien.com. There's a lot of information on there about some of the things that I do and some of the things that I teach. All right, so at the end of every time I do some of these sessions, I always say this: now you know. Now you can go out and you can start restoring your soul, because my prayer has always been that our area would be a community restored. And the way we restore communities is we start with the individual. We start with our souls. And so my biggest prayer has always been, can you imagine if we in this community lived out of restoration? How would that impact the rest of our community if just us in this room just started living out of restoration? And so that's all, that you are part of my prayer. So now you are ambassadors to go out and to live restored and to start living the way God has intended you to live. So let me pray for you to leave. As you leave, Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone in this room and those who are hearing online, God, that you would restore their souls, that they would know that they are so deeply loved, and they would be transformed by that love. I pray that you would meet them on that road of restoration. In Jesus' name, amen. All right.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes.
You guys have a good week.